Today's going to be a good one. But before we dive into it, I am going to give you a tour of my virtual office today. So we have blue skies, blue waters, good times, and the Omega Seamaster Professional 300.
So if you ain't got nothing better to do, let's waste some time.
As we take a look at this watch, this is a classic design by Omega. The Seamaster is an icon. This particular version is the 1990s James Bond version. We're talking model 2531.80.00. And if that's incorrect, you can mock me, and I will also annotate if I did not get that right. The dimensions, 41 millimeter case. We have 46, 47 millimeter lug to lug, depending on your caliper. It wears a little bit larger than that because of the way the bracelet articulates. If you go from that articulation point to this one, you're looking at a shade over 51 millimeters. You have a very thin profile, 10.5, 11 millimeters thick, 20 millimeter lug to lug, 300 meters of water resistance, and just a cool looking watch. And I'm not sure what the cutoff is for vintage. What are the rules around vintage? But this one is certainly nearing, if there is a category, modern vintage. The gentleman I bought it from was the owner, the only owner, the second owner of this watch, and he had purchased it in 1997 in Las Vegas. So the familiar blue dial, blue bezel, the lume on it is certainly not a torch like some models today, but it still has decent lume. And I'm not sure how long lume was supposed to last. It's not something I've ever researched. So I was surprised to see it, how well this still had the lume. We have the date window in white there at the 3 o'clock. The familiar seahorse on the back of this watch. It weighs in at 170 grams on the bracelet, size for my 8-inch wrist, 8.25-inch wrist. And so not light, but certainly not heavy either. You can feel it on your wrist, and that's mostly the bracelet. The watch being so thin is certainly not an anchor around your wrist. The movement is a Omega 1120. It's based on the ETA 2892-2. Now, if you've watched any videos on this channel, because I do mostly what I would say value or approachable watches, I think I've only had a handful that I've done that retail for over $1,000, and everything's in that, $750 and under range for the most part. But when you look at micro brands in the lower rungs of the Swatch group and some other independents, the movements become somewhat repetitive. They're Miyota, they're the Seiko NH35, there's Sellita, and there's a handful of ETA movements in there. So on this watch, when I did some research on this particular Omega 1120, what I found is that it's based, like I said, off the ETA 2892. It has a custom rotor. It has some additional finishing work, and I think one additional jewel. I'll put some links to the articles on the 1120 that I used to do some looking up on this watch. So the overall ergonomics of the watch are maybe the most wearable of any watch that I have ever owned. The bracelet, by far the most comfortable watch that I've worn. The bracelet's the most comfortable bracelet, I should say. The thinness of the watch makes this ideal for year-round wear. Where I'm at in the northern climate, wintertime.
But winter is coming. We know what's coming with it. We can't face it alone.
Becomes an issue with coats and sweaters, and it's when some of my more favorite watches, like this Helm, right, disappear from the rotation. As you can see, a significant difference in thickness between the two. this slides under the cuff of anything that I wear. It's as thin a watch at 10.5 or 11 millimeters. That's, I mean, even in some dress range sizes. So unbelievably comfortable and ergonomic. The bracelet, you know, I'm not an instructional design, and I did see someone comment that they thought one of the reasons why the Omega bracelet was so comfortable was the spacing in between each one of these links, not only for not pulling hair, but also breathability and articulation. And I do know that I have found that the better a watch articulates, the more comfortable it is on my wrist. So why does a channel that's dedicated to sort of value for money watches or approachable watches, I think I've done, you know, I don't know, this channel is relatively new, let's say 20 or 20 some videos, something like that, in that range. And I find joy in trying to find those watches for the working man, the common man, someone who's relatively new to watches and trying to get into it, and providing good value for money. I think money is hard to come by, and I think spending it can be too easy sometimes. So this particular watch, though, I think presents a unique value for money proposition. If you don't have a luxury watch in your collection, this is very approachable in price. A lot of times you can get it for under $2,500 and sometimes under $2,000 depending on condition and quality of the watch. So those things make a difference in the price of it, but for a small amount of money, relatively speaking, in the luxury watch world, when, you know, $5,000 isn't even a lot of money, to get a sense of what luxury is like, or at least what it was like 25 years ago, is, I think, unique. I think also you get some history and some icon status. You get some pop culture fun with that if those things matter to you. You get a watch that you can compare to other watches and start understanding, like when a micro brand, or, you know, like I said, some of the lower end of the Swiss watch companies, and you feel their bracelets, or a Seiko, and you say, huh, that bracelet's not even close. You start to understand why watches cost what they do when you see the finishing and the comfort and the detail that goes into this. So, for example, on this one, the dial on this watch, the macros might be able to pick it up better, but you have that etched wave pattern, which on this old version, it looks pretty neat. That's some dial details that you don't typically see in more approachable watches. You have the skeletonized hands, which some people like, some don't. But you just get a reference point on what is quality and what isn't. Now, on this watch, there's some things that I don't care for. Yep, there's two main ones. One, on my watches, I prefer an hour hand that reaches out further. I mean, a minute hand that reaches out further, and even the hour hand. If you look, there's significant gaps in both of these. It just feels like that handset is too tiny. And if you look at the modern Seamasters, those have grown out more, and I prefer that. The other thing that I'm not a big fan of is this bezel. Now, on my wrist, I can turn it pretty easy, but it is, because of the thinness and because they didn't do anything grippy. Just for comparison, like if you look at the helm, right, this is a very aggressive coin edge that you can really grip and turn. Maybe some actual divers who dive with this can tell me if it's easy when your hands are wet or your gloves are wet. I don't find it hard, but I find you have to concentrate, because you have to actually put more pressure down on top of the bezel than grabbing it on the side and getting, you know, you can't really get a good purchase on the bezel on the sides. It's a downward almost kind of squeeze. So those are two things that I don't particularly care for in this watch. But when I compare it to the other watches in my collection, it's obvious what luxury is. And for a new watch collector, for somebody who's in that intermediate stage of the journey, it is helpful to know what are some higher end things you can compare to and understand. And modern micro brand manufacturing, you know, they do some things pretty well, but when you compare it to on the luxury end, even something a quarter century ago, you start to understand why watches cost the way they do. So who's this watch for? Who's going to make this purchase? Who's going to add it to a collection? Well, I think the main thing this is, it's a great first luxury watch, because I think you can do some good shopping, you can get a good bargain, and you get a lot of value for money, even at $2,500. I think the prices on these have been going up over the past year, but an absolutely good value for money. I think even as high as $2,500 and higher depending on condition. But you can do some looking, you can be patient, you can find a good buy on this, and it's a watch that you likely won't get hurt on. If you want to sell it a couple months later because you don't really dig it, you're not going to take a bath on it, right? You buy some of these watches out there, micro brands or even decent Swiss-made watches, again on the Swatch side of things, and you're gonna take a little bit of a beating in trying to sell it back out. Not the case with this watch. Two, it could certainly be your everyday watch. I don't know how versatile blue is. I'm not a fashion consultant, but this watch looks good. And this one in particular has the aluminum bezel insert, so you start having that faded blue, which I think is kind of neat when that fade, when you come by that fade, honestly. So first luxury watch, everyday watch. At 25 years old, I think, you know, I'm not sure that I would take it and beat it up out in water sports, but I think it probably could handle it if it's been serviced recently and you're sure on the water resistance certification is solid and good to go. I don't see why you wouldn't take it back out on the water. I'm a fan of it. I'm a fan of it if you have do not have a luxury watch in your collection and you're looking to kind of test the waters a bit. You get an icon, you get a classic design, you get a solid company behind it, you get a watch that's serviceable, you get a watch that you can sell. You might even be able to make a few bucks down the road selling it. I think it checks all those boxes. I love it. I will cut it off there. Thanks for hanging out. For those of you who are a big fan of the watch, what did I miss? Is there something that you would add to the equation? Certainly wearable, certainly iconic, certainly good value for money. What else is there that I'm missing on this watch? Take a minute to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, strike a blow for a common man on YouTube, just doing common man reviews straight ahead. Honest, just giving you some data points. So until next time, thank you and God bless.